I've been a gamer for nearly 40 years now, and I've witnessed firsthand the evolution of games. One thing that's seen a big change over the last few years is the developers' approach to the depiction of war in games. Yes, we still get a swathe of gung-ho, gun-toting super soldiers taking on the enemy single-handed and triumphing against all odds, and I've no objection to that as it can be a lot of fun. However, I've taken far more enjoyment recently from games that have a more considered approach to the horrors of war. So here is my look at 3 titles that I've enjoyed very much and have taken a very different approach to their war in games. This war of mine is a recent discovery from me thanks to it being free on PlayStation Plus this month. This is a survival game which, typically for the genre, requires you to find resources, secure your base, craft useful items and get yourself fed and healthy. The twist here is that rather than soldiers, you're dealing with a group of civilian survivors. Your 3 or 4 characters are stuck in a war-torn city that's been bombed to hell and has hostile forces trying to dominate or survive, often at your expense. It takes place over 2 phases, a daytime phase where you use gathered materials to craft items like water purifiers, beds, basic weapons, heaters, and to maintain the health of your protagonists. Injuries and illnesses need to be treated before they become life-threatening, hunger needs to be managed, and lack of sleep can quickly affect the efficacy and mental health of the team. Every action takes time, and when the clock strikes 8 PM, the next phase happens. Phase 2 takes place at night. Those team members you select to stay at the base are assigned roles. They can sleep or guard. Without sufficient guards, you may get raided. Without sufficient sleep, your team can become unwell. You must balance this carefully to get the best from everyone. In this phase, one team member can go out scavenging for items. They will have a list of locations with various risks and rewards, and you will then control the player while they explore these locations and deal with hazards. You may have to deal with a military outpost and sneak around hoping not to get caught. Civilians may still occupy homes and you can choose to steal from them, but there will be consequences if you do. When this phase finishes, your character returns to base camp to find out what happened to the others overnight, and so the cycle repeats. The genius of this game is that the consequences can be significant. Stealing from others can cause your team to become sad or depressed to the point where they will leave or die. Killing is an option, but not a wise one, as you're quite vulnerable. However, this will have a significant impact on your character's mental health. The thing that hammered home this game's take on conflict was an early playthrough when I scavenged a hospital. I saw a couple of people who I thought were nasty army types and managed to kill one, pick up his gun and kill the other. I could see that there were other people in the hospital, so I thought I was in for a big fight. However, it turned out that the others were all patients, nurses and doctors, all now frightened to death because their protectors had been murdered. I would have been perfectly safe had I not attacked, and could have used the hospital to trade items, mend wounds and treat illnesses. When my character returned to the house in the morning, rather than his usual upbeat greeting to his friends, he sank to his knees, put his face in his hands and said, "What have I done?" He became depressed, and the other 2 were now sad, statuses that affect several factors such as healing and movement speed. And as a player, I felt guilt. A computer game made me feel guilty and held me to account for my actions. Not only had I unnecessarily killed 2 men, but those actions had negatively impacted on the very characters I was supposed to be helping survive. Now my decisions are more cautious, more measured. Sometimes the games will force you to make a difficult decision, but now it's because I have no other choice and I'm prepared for the consequences. As the game progresses, materials become more scarce, scavenging more dangerous, beautifully invoking the increasing desperation every player and NPC alike would feel in that situation. I've yet to survive 40 days, so I don't know what the end game is. I get the feeling that rescue won't be all sunshine and bunnies though. So it's hard-nosed look into the effect war has on people. It's bleak, reflected by the black and white aesthetic, sometimes harrowing, and always emotive. It's not a game that you will enjoy in a traditional sense, but in some respects it holds up a mirror to the motivation and harsh realities of conflict, and that it's a very brave and unique thing for a game to do. Valiant Hearts is without doubt one of my favourite games of this generation and topped my favourite games list for 2014. Valiant Hearts was published by Ubisoft. It follows the story of 4 characters through the horrors of the First World War. This is not a shooter or a third-person action game, it's a side-scrolling puzzle platform game. The power of this game is its beautiful character development that shows painfully how ordinary people were affected by this terrible conflict. The developers partnered with 2 educational companies to add archive photographs and other educational resources which add a terrifying insight into the conflict. As with This War of Mine, it deals with very identifiable characters who we can all relate to. Emile is a French farmer who joins the army to help his country and gets to see the full horror of trench warfare firsthand. Karl is Emile's son-in-law who was thrown out of France at the start of the war because he's German. He has to leave his wife and child behind and finds himself fighting on the opposite side to his father-in-law. Freddy is an American living in Paris who joins the French army driven by a need to avenge a loved one killed by a German officer. Anna is a Belgian vet who volunteers as a medic and has to deal with the death and destruction wrought by the war through treating soldiers on both sides. There's also Walt, a faithful dog that interacts with all of the other characters and is key to solving some of the game's puzzles. The game has a very cartoony style, which in some respects acts as a buffer to some of the more horrific elements, preventing the game from becoming so overwhelmingly bleak that players back off. Despite the graphical style, the story that unfolds, with very little dialogue, is personal and affecting. The flawed characters have an understandable motivation and are very likeable. As a result, the unpleasant and horrific things that they see hit home like sledgehammer blows. It's an incredibly sensitive portrayal of one of the most wasteful conflicts the world has ever known, and input from educational organisations ensured as much accuracy and detail as possible. Another thing this game did very well was not to demonise one side or the other. Other than one slightly pantomime villain, the game made sure that the real enemy was the war itself and not the people involved. It's a downbeat game, and the ending is shocking and horrific, and beautifully captures the futility and human cost of any war. Ubisoft really need recognition for the sensitive and intelligent way they dealt with this topic, and it is a game that will stay with me for a long time. If you want to see a full playthrough, click on the link in the description or the card at the top of the video. Valkyria Chronicles is without a doubt one of my all-time favourite games. I played it to death when it launched on PS3, and despite still having my PS3 copy and a PS3 to play it on, I still got the remastered edition for PS4. This is a strategy role-playing game, my favourite genre, set in an alternate Europe and an alternate version of World War II. The peaceful country of Gallia is invaded by their hostile and more powerful neighbour, the East European Imperial Alliance, who is hungry for the valuable resource Ragnite, which is available in abundance in Gallia. Countries invading their neighbours for valuable fuel resources, nothing familiar there. The story centres around Squad 7, a militia force comprised of Gallian citizens who play a big part in the fight against the Imperial Alliance. There's a theme emerging here. Once again, none of the protagonists are soldiers. They have military training, but are not full-time combat specialists. Welkin, the leader of Squad 7, is a science teacher. Alicia works in a bakery, Largo is a farmer, and Rosie is a cabaret singer. And all the main and incidental characters are given backstory and personality, so they never become faceless goons who are disposable. Your main story characters cannot die in combat. However, the other troops you take with you can die permanently. And as their characters are so well fleshed out, the personnel tab in the game gives detailed bios of everyone that fills out more you use them. And even though you only hear them speak in battle, the voice acting is so much quirky character you invest in them. This investment means that death actually does matter, and you will mourn for your fallen comrades. My favourite was Jan, a gay lancer who was totally in love with Largo and got a stat boost when he was standing with other men. Nancy was an upbeat girl who got a stat boost when standing on grass and happily chirped "happy grass" whenever she was running through the green stuff. Now, this is a Japanese game and sometimes had characters and moments that may jar with a Western audience. The intelligent winged pig mascot and Largo's obsession with vegetables were a little over the top. You also get an enemy character with magical powers. But what you have running under the beautiful graphics, excellent gameplay and quirky Japaneseness is an overarching story about the effect war has upon decent, ordinary people. There's a race called Darksons who are considered to be second-class citizens by many Gallians and are subject to segregation, mistrust and racism. There is a sub-story between Rosie, a Gallian, and Isara, a Darkson, where Rosie's prejudice means that despite Isara's excellence and importance to the squad, she can never bring herself to trust her. This story arc is resolved both tragically and beautifully. There is also a part of the game that deals, shockingly, with ethnic cleansing, obviously intended to draw parallels with Jewish concentration camps and Hitler's final solution. This scene really stopped me in my tracks. I really couldn't believe that this was being addressed in a game, and made other elements of the story, particularly the treatment of the Darksons, much more powerful. There are squad characters with a debuff called Darkson Hater, where they would lose attack or defensive power if they were standing next to a Darkson character. I stopped putting those characters in the unit after this sequence. But the one event that stands out for me in this game is when Welkin and Alicia are separated from the rest of Squad 7 and have to make their way carefully through a forest filled with enemy troops. At the end of this section, they come across an enemy soldier terminally wounded. They care for the soldier and give him comfort until he dies. They are discovered the following morning by an enemy commander and some of his troops. The commander sees what they've done for one of his men and lets them go, saying that we are not so different after all, and hope that they may meet again one day under better circumstances. It's a small exchange, but importantly humanises the general enemy soldiers from then on. You can relate to them as they are in the same position as you. The strength of the game is that the characters are well developed, likeable, flawed, but most importantly, relatable. In similar circumstances, they could be you. We can't properly relate to BJ Blazkowicz or Master Chief because they are super soldiers that we could never hope to be. But we can relate to teachers, farmers and bakers, because we all probably know someone who do these things. Many people fighting in the First and Second World Wars were conscripted, volunteered, or drafted, and fought with very little training and often poor equipment. Sadly, their experiences often left more than physical scars. Although Valkyria Chronicles has an upbeat, happy ending, the plight of Squad 7, their victories and their losses stay with you until after the game finishes, as a reminder that no one really wins in war. I do honestly believe that games can play a part in educating us about real issues. Life is Strange dealt with mental illness and suicide. This Dragon Cancer looked at the effects terminal illness has on families. Games like Dragon Age Inquisition and The Last of Us had strong LGBT characters. Even Battlefield's single-player campaign looks at the futility of some of the actions in World War I, and the infamous white phosphorus reveal in Spec Ops The Line was shocking in the extreme. There is still very much a place for good old-fashioned gun-blazing actions, but with the gaming community's average age going up, 45 is not old for a gamer, developers need to look at how content can engage with and impact a more mature audience who may want more from their gaming experience than simple, bloody carnage. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting, and if you have, give it a like, give it a share, and subscribe to the channel for more content. Thank you very much, and as always, have a fantastic gaming week. Bye bye for now.